Hey folks, here we are. We're live. We're on time. It's Sam, as promised, talking about Venus 2020, recent relationship corrections, changes, and what we can expect from Venus in 2020. Definitely some intense shifts that are happening this year. As Venus will be, in its exalted position in a couple months. I'm sorry, it'll be in its own sign and retrograde, which I'm going to talk about. All of a sudden, it's also been exalted and having some aspects on it. So I'm going to talk about those things. And what I'm also want to be showing people here is this web class that I have. I just put a link in the chat to this. You can go and click the link, or even just go to 2020venus.com, as you see, 2020venus.com, and click it, and you get this free web class that's very powerful. And I go over these indicators that are really going to help you for Venus this year. And again, 2020 Venus for your sign, and all 12 signs includes this exalted transit that we've been experiencing in February, and also the retrograde cycle that comes in March. Also, why are different sections of the sky difficult for Venus, and consequently for relationships? And, we're really going to land this evolutionary process of Venus, how we go from the kind of stimulated personal nature of wanting to enjoy life and fulfill our personal desires and wanting to share that with others, then ultimately seeing it in the highest, most spiritual sense. But then the functional nature of Venus that we can see through each of the ascending signs, the 12 signs, and then remedies and practices to elevate Venus. All of this is shown, and then you just click reserve my seat, and then this pops down, and then you select a date and time. Again, there are many different times and dates available in the next few days, but you can also watch the instant replay. You can watch it right now or after this is done. There's also a replay available link, and then you just register. So it's very easy. And so that's something that's definitely available to people for sure. And so, besides that, we have a great, I'll be talking today about Venus in the sky. And where the planets are. You can see we got this Lord Shiva wallpaper. He's watching over us now. Since my Shivaratri video last week, I like having Mahadeva sitting there watching, keeping me honest, keeping you honest, right? So you see where we have the planets right now, and I decided to do this video today on Venus because we have a Moon-Venus conjunction. Look up in the sky after sunset, and you'll see Moon-Venus conjunction right now. The moon is starting to wax more. It's getting brighter, and you'll see it next to Venus in the sky. So Venus is quite bright right now because it's going to be going retrograde in a couple months. And again, that might sound a long way off. It's really not. But before it goes retrograde, it's very bright. And so we have this right now. Hang on a second. So we have that Venus right now in the sky. Oops, let me just do a few things here. Sorry. Okay, this one. Let me just do this. 1 second. And that bright Venus in the sky is what happens when the planet goes retrograde. It gets very bright because it means that it's at the point in its orbit where it's getting closest to the Earth, right? And so right now, as I'm doing this today, we see this this Venus will be bright in the sky, and the moon the next couple of days will be very close to Venus. So it's definitely a time to notice this, and it's exalted Venus. So Venus has been exalted since February 2nd. And when Venus is exalted, it's in the sign of Pisces, where it's trying to universalize and spiritualize our desires and spiritualize the relationship that we have with our desires. I have this little cowlick here. And see, I'm noticing I'm fixing up my hair a little bit, Venus, right? I had a little thing back there. And it's trying to spiritualize our desires and elevate them beyond just the physical, the personal, right? And this is something that's related to the sign of Pisces, right? Whereas Venus gets debilitated and kind of hung up when it gets around Virgo, because it's very much about the world and all the details of the world and all the specific details, and it can be kind of nitpicky and transactional and take the joy out of that elevated concept of beauty, which is what Venus experiences in Pisces. But one of the things that also happens when planets get exalted is it really raises the standard, because the vibration is so high. And I'll say particularly with Venus, because the vibration is so high, it tends to lead to a bit of disappointment, perhaps, with the worldly nature of it, the worldly expression of it. And of course, with Venus, that includes things like romance and love and other people, specifically where we're trying to engage and sort of get it. And this is sort of how our ego works and how our mind works, is something bubbles up in our consciousness and our ego says, okay, I want to get some of that now. Okay, this is part of me. I'm this Venus being. I have this Venus nature that wants to enjoy life, that wants to experience beauty and pleasure, because we're here to experience it through the agency of the body, the mind, the heart, the soul. And we're like, okay, now I want to get some of that and feel some of it, experience some of it. So many times Venus in Pisces, our desires get very, they really awaken. And it might be for all kinds of things, all kinds of sensual things. The last, for the month of February, you might have felt excessively sensual. Maybe even for things like indulgences, like snacks or food, or again, sex, or wanting to connect. But then it's also, it can be very elevated, but then it can also be a kind of disappointment with that experience, because again, Pisces is things that are not of this world. And what Venus in, the exalted placement of Venus in Pisces is showing that what we're really looking for is an experience of beauty in this world that is beyond, that is metaphysical, that is beyond just the people, the experiences, and the engagements that we operate, that we can cognize through the senses and through the mind and the heart. That ultimately all of that is going to bring some sort of disappointment. And that disappointment usually takes the form of some disappointment with other people. And of course, we can always find an excuse, like they did something I didn't like, they hurt my feelings, I thought you were this, but you're that. Some kind of projection that we have. And Venus in Pisces is actually full of projections. Pisces is literally the sign of projections. And then disappointment in the projection. Right? You may have heard me talk about this, but if you haven't, you should understand that many of our disappointments come from Jupiter. Jupiter is actually the energy that leads to disappointment, because it's looking for something high beyond this world, like our gurus and our teachers and our religions and those big things that we believe. So when planets are in Jupiter's signs, which is like the feeling of Jupiter, they're often disappointed. They experience a level of disappointment with the world, because they're looking for it to be something otherworldly. And particularly in Pisces, because Pisces is so mystical and metaphysical. So, it shows where things like sex and beauty can have a transcendent quality during that time, but then we come back to Earth and we realize, and again, if it's not a disappointment or an anger or frustration with the other person, it's also even just a recognition that whatever this temporal world is, and the beauty that we can get from it, it's not ultimate. It's not transcendent. It's just part of the body, mind structure, ego structure of this world. So we've been experiencing quite a bit of that, at least the potential of that for the last month or so, since early February. So I see we have some people here. Oh, my Shiva Kami Esther is here. Shiva Kami Esther. Hara Hara Mahadev. Shiva Kami Esther. Laura Hardy. Hi. Vimala, benefited so much from your videos. Thank you. You're welcome. Sunny Side Up has said hello to me and everyone. And actually, my Venus is in Libra. That's what she said. Okay. Maui horoscope. Aloha. See, I'm saying hi to everybody. I feel like I want to say hi to everybody. I'm in such a good mood because with Venus in Libra, or I'm sorry, with Venus, with the moon joined Venus. What am I talking about? Yeah, with the moon joined Venus, we're like right here. We're somewhere like here. Usually I'm all grouchy and mean, but today I feel happy. So you're going to get happy Sam, not grouchy, mean, telling you you're going to die Sam. None of that today. I'm not going to tell you any of that today. You've heard it enough. I'm going to be so friendly, you won't even recognize me. How's that? Right? Happy Sam. So, see, Om Shum Shukraya Namaha. There you go. That's the way to say it. Namaste, Lisa Torrance. The Woodliff. Hi, Sam. And then we have Lisa Torrance. Namaste. AJ, my Sam is my Venus is 3rd house Sagittarius. There you go. And so I'm in a good mood too. Yes, we're all in a good mood today. We love your Jekyll and Hyde, Sam. There you go. So this is, definitely a time right now where we can experience that, where, especially with the moon joined Venus and in Pisces, it's quite metaphysical, mystical. And, it's also very, we can really feel that higher appreciation for the things that we have, that give us joy, beauty, happiness. And eventually, and ultimately we can feel that appreciation that we have for other people and, all of that. And so Venus is the last couple days there. If we move it forward, we'll see. This is the 26th. This is tomorrow. Wednesday the 26th. You can see it's 28 of Pisces, then 2907 on the 27th, then the 28th. By this time on the 28th, in a few days, it goes into Aries. Then I'm going to be mean. So get ready. Venus in Aries, then I'm going to be mean as it gets. No, but Venus in Aries, and then it moves out of that Pisces realm, and it goes into Aries, where we're very much about our own desires, our own, we're somewhat more insistent about what we want to make us happy. Again, it's a sign that's ruled by Mars. There could be a lot more insistence on our own happiness and things like that. So when you see the moon Venus interacting with Mars, either the planet or in its signs, there's often, an insistence on our own desires. And, what winds up happening, and it's important to understand how these karmas work and what these karmas are about. But what it means is that, and again, it's not a judgment, but astrologers should understand this and be able to explain it, and people should understand it too. It means that when the Venus is in like fire signs, especially, or, in particular, because fire is very individualized, it can often mean where, I'm focused on what I want and my pleasure, my happiness, my values. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being focused on it. But what that does is it can take away the enjoyment that Venus gives us, which ultimately Venus is the thing that gives us the enjoyment of other people and being able to experience other people's enjoyment. We'll still be able to experience what we experience and enjoy it, but it can often short circuit that desire to want to see others happy. And that's kind of like the next level. That's like the next vibrational frequency of Venus. When it's powerful, we evolve out of our enjoyment and wanting to share it and wanting to do things where other people's enjoyment is just as important, and not even just as important in an equal way, but almost doubles the enjoyment. Think about it when you're getting along, and it doesn't mean a person can't experience it. It just means that it's harder, that the first instinct is to say, well, I need to be happy first. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. And if you have like Venus and fire signs or whatever it is, and even if it's not, this is the other lesson to understand, is that Venus is our capacity to not just enjoy for ourselves, but to want to share. And in sharing, it doubles the enjoyment. It multiplies the enjoyment. Let's use an example that's not so politically correct, but it would be appropriate. Let's say when you're, like sharing sexuality with another person. How much better is that than, let's say, doing it by yourself? Well, of course, it magnifies it. It's not even times 2. It might be times 10. Now, we could still experience pleasure by ourselves, and that would feel good to our senses. But how much better does it feel when it's another person? And not even just the sensual experience, but the emotional experience, the whole spiritual experience, the way that is a doorway into something that's beyond. So again, it's like things evolve and grow exponentially. It's not just like twice as good. It's almost like 10 times as good. And even in the act itself is not only 10 times as good, but then it's a portal to something else that's not even accessible from the first level. So this is actually an experience of the gunas as well. This is how the gunas work as well. Because again, when we're in the tamasic guna, it doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that it's for our own happiness. By the way, Venus is a good one because the tamasic nature of Venus could be for just our physical pleasure. Again, the tamasic nature of Venus is literally known as pleasure. And pleasure doesn't need another person, doesn't require another person. But then there's happiness, like with another person, where pleasure is actually part of it. Pleasure sort of comes along for the ride, and then it becomes happiness. And then the pleasure gets magnified so much, but it's not only that, but then the happiness leads to something that's like the bliss of the soul. And so it's not only that the happiness is so much more magnified than the pleasure, but the pleasure, which is the tamasic, doesn't even have access to the bliss of the soul without the intermediate experience of the happiness. So it's not even just that the happiness is such a higher vibration of the pleasure, but the happiness is the conduit toward the bliss of the soul and the thing that's not even of this earth. Because it's very hard to get to the physical pleasure just for me to the bliss of the soul. They're almost not connected. It's like a circuit isn't connected. So we need to elevate that vibration. I use sex as an example, but it can be any kind of thing that gives us happiness and joy instead of just our own personal pleasure. And so again, this whole nature of Venus to evolve within us through the 3 gunas, body, mind, and spirit, tamas, rajas, sattva, is so important. And again, to reestablish what I was saying earlier, that if you did want to learn about these things in a much higher way, you can see this web class that I've put together. I explain this in great detail. It's more than an hour long. And you can learn all about, how Venus evolves. You know, the evolutionary process of Venus is what I just basically described. And then the functional nature of Venus means how each one of the 12 signs experiences this evolutionary process of pleasure becoming bliss. Each of the 12 zodiac signs, including yours, experiences that in a different way. Because Venus is a functional benefic for some and a functional malefic for others. So I break all of that down on this free class. You know, again, I do these things this way so that people who are serious sit there and really dedicate your headspace to it. There's a great outline that you can download when you go there. And again, you'll also learn how Venus for your sign is going to be this whole year, because we have a couple big shifts that are happening, which I'm going to walk you through in a minute. But again, if you go to 2020venus.com, you can see that's this webpage, 2020venus.com. That's the webpage where it gets, you know, where you can go there. And again, I'll post it again here, 2020venus.com. I really invite people to go deeper and really learn this stuff. Again, I love doing these free videos, but it's also, I like to try to invite people to go deeper and actually learn this stuff really well. And so it's a different experience when you do a webinar like that, because I have a whole download for you, and it's like, it would be like if I came to your town and sat in front of you and taught this to you, right? Just because it's free, don't devalue it. It's important to see how that, you know, those valuable things that we have now at our disposal. So anyway, as we go forward, and I'll run this forward a couple weeks, you see that Venus is going to go into Taurus. It goes into Taurus in early, you know, by early April, Venus is in Taurus. Then it winds up, it goes to the end of Taurus, then it turns retrograde. You see here, it turns retrograde on May 13th, May 12th, May 13th. It turns retrograde, right? So it winds up being in Taurus from, let's do the exact day here. So it winds up being in Taurus for a long time. Winds up being in Taurus from May 28th. So like March 28th. So like a month from now. So like a month from now until, so March 28th until August. It's a long time. That's almost 4 months. March 28th will be like almost like April 1st, which would be 4/1, until like August 1st. So we're going to have Venus in Taurus for 4 months. So those of you who are ruled by Venus, those of you who, like, for example, for Scorpio ascendant, this is going to be great for Scorpio ascendant. Venus will be going through your 7th house for 4 months. It'll be great for your relationships, to really understand yourself in relationships, your partnerships, maybe find a new love and romance. Again, you can see where, especially once Venus turns retrograde in the what I just said, May 13th, around that time, once Venus turns retrograde, like May 13th until like the middle of, around the end of June, what's the exact day? Yeah, until June 24th. So May 13th until June 24th or 25th, it's usually about 40 days, Venus goes retrograde. That can really shake some things up. And then Venus starts moving forward again by the end of June until early August. So then even after it turns retrograde, or after it turns direct, it starts to slow down. So that's why planets, you know, Venus is usually in a sign for less than a month or around a month. We just saw Venus was in Pisces from February 2nd till February 28th. That's only 26 days. It's not even 30 days. It's not even a month. It's going to go in this retrograde cycle in Taurus in its own sign for 4 months. It's like 4 times as long as it's usually in a sign. Now, again, that's really profound, because it shows that time coming up from late March until early August. It's a huge time for you to totally transform your relationships. And again, in that web class that I just talked about, I described that whole transition for each of the 12 signs. You should know this. This is why, again, 2020 Venus, this is huge. Venus doesn't spend, you know, it doesn't happen all the time where it's 4 months in Taurus, its own sign. So it's really about stabilizing, really connecting, really grounding and creating like that sort of stable relationship, with yourself as much as anything first. Finding those things that you value the most first and really owning those things. And because first you have to find what's most valuable to you, what's your deepest values. How are you most valued? How do you want to be valued? How do you value others? Again, those internal values first, and then how you and how you want to be validated through those values, and then how you value others as a result. If you don't value yourself well enough, then you're not going to know how, then you're going to be looking for others to validate you. And then and then almost absolutely, no matter what they do, at some point, it's going to leave you not feeling valued because you're lost in the other person's interpretation. Even if there's a good feeling or a this or a that. Again, back to what I was just saying about Venus and Pisces, where if someone doesn't know their own value or they don't know their own, sense of value, they don't value themselves, you can have a beautiful relationship experience with another person, but if you don't know yourself and your own value, your whole experience is going to be a projection of them onto them, saying, oh, you're fantastic, validate me. And then as long as they're validating you, you like them. And you're like, oh, you're so great, you're so great. But then as soon as they don't validate you, if you don't know your own value, you're going to then project the negative onto them. Oh, I thought you were so great, but you're actually horrible. And underneath it all, they were neither one. You were losing yourself in the projection because you don't know your own value yet. And again, the closer we get to our own value and valuing ourselves, we don't need the other person to validate us. We don't lose ourselves in the projection onto them and therefore feel lost if they don't treat us the way we want them to treat us in a certain moment or something like that. Because again, even all of these problems that we have within our relationships, most of it comes from this, from these overreactions, these extreme overreactions. We put too much importance on what the other person says, and we lose ourselves in that and build up this whole fantasy around it. And then when it doesn't conform to our fantasy, then we project the other extreme. Oh, now you're horrible. Well, I thought you were amazing, but you're horrible. And again, it winds up being this complete fantasy world rather than knowing ourselves, knowing our value, seeing that, this is a place where I feel valued. And when we're not, being able to understand that and ask for what we want and to be able to communicate what's not congruent with our values and how we want to be appreciated in a way that the other person can hear rather than accusation, insults, aggression. Again, because this is where relationships then start to really break down. We go too far on the Venus end. Oh, I'll do anything. I'll accommodate anything. And then when that doesn't work, we go too far on the Mars end. Oh, you're terrible. You're horrible. You did this to me. Look at what you did to me. I would have done anything. I was so amazing. I was so loving and willing, and you were horrible. You were terrible. Everything gets polarized in this unreal way. So this transit from late March 28th until August 1st, of Venus going through Taurus, again, forward and retrograde. The retrograde cycle for 40 days starting May 13th is going to be a time to really cycle through this and really see that. And it starts with our own values, valuing ourselves. This is why Venus is so powerful in Taurus, because Taurus is slow. It slows things down. It's very thorough. It's about enjoyment, and it's about contentment. It's about being happy with what we have, being content with what we have, right? And saying, what I have is enough. I can be content with that. And I'm appreciate what people do for us. Appreciate that people try to get along with us. Appreciate that. Appreciate that you're not the only one trying. Appreciate that others are trying to get along with you and all your stuff too. That goes a long way. And again, when Venus is powerful, we already do that. So the thing I was saying earlier, maybe about Venus and the fire signs as an example, one of the things that can happen is that not thinking of the other person. Because like I said, fire signs are very individual, where we think about me and all that I've done. Look at how hard I've tried. Look at how much I do to try to accommodate. Okay, well, other people try too. They're trying to get along with you too. You're not the only one. You're not the only one who's trying to meet someone halfway. And even if it doesn't feel like it, even if instead of being halfway, you've gone way further, at least in your mind, well, that was you who did that. If you went way further, they obviously think you're okay with whatever you've done. And so again, this is what often happens with Venus. We go too far with Venus, and then we get mad at the other person because we've gone too far, as if it's their fault. We already went further than maybe we should have. We can't blame them for that. If we're agreeing to do something or saying we're okay, they think we're okay. We can't go too far with something, and then because we've gone too far, get mad at them because we went too far. It's up to us to say, no, I only go this far. I go this far and you go this far. You have to meet me here. So this is the big trick of Venus. And, by the way, the reason we go too far is because we want the connection. We want the connection. You want the connection for yourself because you want to experience that Venus joy. And because you want to experience the Venus joy, it's like, okay, I'll go all the way over here because I want to feel that thing. So just know that this is the process, and it's okay to go that far. But we don't have to then get mad because we went that far. We can then just back up and go, some things have been happening, and I'm not sure I feel so good about it. And it's been great that this has been going on, and that in going further, I've really gotten to see this thing about myself and see something about you that's been beautiful and blah, blah, blah. But I'm also realizing that it was a little bit off with something inside of me. And we come back and we speak about it in a way that's not like, look at what you did. Like they forced us to do that. No one can force you to do anything. Notice this sunset. So the sunset is now coming, and it's shining through my off of my mirror over there. It's pretty cool. One of the cool things about living with the West is I get to see the sunset move all year. So we're about a month away from the equinox, but I get to see it go all the way back and forth. So anyway, but it's a nice light. Someone said, beautiful light. Yeah, it's beautiful. So, but yes, so Sarvani. Nice to see you, Sarvani. So beautiful out there. Yes, indeed. Sarvani knows where I'm at. So anyway, this is a lot of what we're going to be doing. And these next couple months, again, literally, we just had Venus exalted, or we still have Venus exalted in Pisces. And then it spends a month or so. It spends a month from February 28th until March 28th, literally a literal month in Aries. And then from then until August, which is like more than half the year, it's in Taurus. So again, that's why I did this web class with 2020 Venus, because it's huge this year. This beautiful exaltation, which we're still experiencing, and then this long retrograde cycle in Taurus, which can really shake things up and can really show a kind of back and forth sort of corrective process around some of your relationships and interactions. But again, when you start to see that retrograde motion that happens, let's say in the middle of May, examine your projections. examine your projections, examine your compromises, examine how you've maybe gone too far. And then when you try to get it back with kindness. Realize that what you've learned and why you went further and what benefited you by being extended beyond your usual comfort zone. And that's also part of Venus. This is the process of Venus. Because we want to connect with the other people so much, we extend ourselves. And again, it's not just romantically either. It's in all relationships with equals. We're always doing this. Friendships, all relationships that we have with other equals. That's what Venus is ruling, especially where there's a lot of desires on the line. That's why it's about business partnerships as well. Anything where you're trying to fulfill your desires with another person and you need their agreement in order to do it. And think about it, that's what relationships are. I talked about it earlier. It's like you're basically both saying, I want to enhance my pleasure by like 10x, but I need you to agree to do it with me. And let's try to do that together. And let's try to meet each other halfway or even a little bit more than halfway. And if we do that, if we extend beyond ourselves, there's this great payoff that's not possible if we stay in our comfort zone. So let's try it. Let's try it and see what happens. Now, we might get it screwed up because we might go too far. And if we do, let's back up and stay respectful and kind and appreciate what the other person has done. Appreciate the other person is trying to work it out with us as well. Don't turn into a monster because you got your feelings hurt. Oh, I did for you and you did this. Again, this is the death of relationships, is people stop being kind and respectful to the other person. And of course, the justification is, well, look what you did to me. Okay, perhaps some of that's true. But is there ever a reason? Do we ever feel good? Is it ever really worth it to then tear into somebody that we love by that time, that we have great deep feelings for? Does it ever feel good when we tell them off? I mean, even when you win, you don't win. Even when you win, you lose. So that's what Venus teaches us. It teaches us to slow down with that. Again, often because of the consequences of our own mistakes, because we realize I'm going to wind up feeling more unhappy if I act this way. So that corrective experience that's happening will be very important from the middle of the spring through the middle of the summer, from the middle of May until early August. Or no, not the middle of May, the early spring, from March 28th until March 28th until August the 1st. I'm sorry. So very powerful. And again, just to show it, because people pop on this at different times and different moments, show it again and post the link again, because people, as I've been mentioning, you can get a free, it's like a 60-minute web class on this where I teach this in great detail. And I talk about I glossed over some of the things here, but I go into very deep lessons of Venus. Not only that, but how to do astrology. Because again, you're listening to this, you should learn this beyond just, tell me about me. Astrology works in a very beautiful, systematic way. And all these universal principles that I'm talking about compromise and this and that, they're all a little bit different for each of the 12 signs. For example, it's obviously easier for people that are ruled by Venus, Libra and Taurus, that nature of understanding how to go, a little bit beyond and then come back, and how to work with that is much easier if you're ruled by Venus. If Venus is your ruling planet, that your whole nature revolves around that. But if you're someone like Leo, Sagittarius, your nature revolves around something very different. You're naturally geared toward your own identity and the power of your own individuality in a good way. That's what you're here to teach the world, really, is how to have strength and personal power and confidence. And so all of those virtues of compromise and all that, it's harder for you. So that nature of Venus is harder to integrate. People that are ruled by Mars, same kind of thing. It's opposite your nature. Your nature is, no, I feel this way, and I'm going to, if I get my feelings hurt, I'm going to fight. It's a fighting sign. If you're ruled by Mars and the Aries and Scorpio, your nature is, when something happens, confront it, fight it, take it on directly. Again, it's harder to like go, okay, well, maybe that's not the best way to approach this area of life. Again, if you're again, Libra, Taurus, Capricorn, Aquarius, that nature of Venus much easier to understand. So these are the kinds of things I talk about on the web class. I explain each of the 12 signs, including yours, but I also understand how, when you do astrology and you're studying how to do it correctly, and what the zodiac is not just one segregated, it's not just like one segregated point in relation to all the other ones. It's a holistic mandala of energy. And so that's what I describe. That's what I talk about on that web class as well. So as we see here, the Love Oracle Tarot says, I so appreciate the depth and breadth of wisdom you share with us. You're certainly welcome. I love it. And I'm glad you're here to enjoy it and to take it in. And I invite you to go deeper. This is why I offer these deeper teachings. That's what the web classes are, because then it's a more segregated time as well, where you get a download that you can download and look at and really sort of take it to a deeper level, and eventually maybe even study this and learn how to do it yourself. Mihir Shah said, so beautifully stated, Sam. Thank you. Peace Candidate says, the golden rule. Hi, Sam. You're awesome. Great. Wonderful point. I guess I made a wonderful point somewhere along the line. We learn so much about ourselves through our relationship with others. Yes, and in fact, it's a mirror reflection. It's like holding up a mirror, right? So, oh, there's my Malini. My Malini is here. Dr. Malini Iyer. You've seen her on my channel. There she is. Yep, overcompromising and blaming the other person for overcompromise. Been there, done that. Need to work on it. We all do. We all do. And, here's the thing to understand. Malini has Libra rising, and, a Libra and Taurus might even do it more than others, but they do it more than others because that's their nature, is to activate that energy more. But you also have it much more active, so you're also much better at it than the rest of us. So, yeah, it's just like anything else. It's a great skill that a Libra or a Taurus has, but again, it's also like a great superpower. So, so we're starting to lose the light here. You can see the light has just gone down. Or no, not quite yet. It's still, sunset is not quite hit 100% yet. I can still see it's a little bit of a disc. But Love Oracle Tarot says, I'm registered. Good. I'm glad to see that you'll be watching that 2020 Venus. And that'll be a real deep dive into that. It's a question, will you always have trouble when you have Venus in the 12th house with a debilitated sun? No, and again, always, nothing is always or never. I say nothing is always or never, right? All the planets are divine forces. So at certain moments, Venus works perfectly for all of us, no matter where it is. All the planets do. The dignities, and again, you have to look at the whole chart. But the dignity, which is what debilitated is one consideration, and it just shows a tendency to have it be the way I described when I described, well, you didn't say the sign. I'm sorry, you said the 12th house. The 12th house is just a particular thing where there's confusion around that nature. So it's just a particular thing that you would have to be aware of, making it more conscious. So a 12th house would be, 12th house Venus is, it's very easy to kind of get into a fantasy about this whole thing and kind of fantasize about the whole kind of exchange. That's what the 12th house is related to. Hang on a second. I'll keep going. I should have turned the light on before I started, but okay, we got the light on now. But yeah, so the 12th house is just where where we're confused about something, where we're kind of not sure about what we're doing, right? And so there's also a lot of escapism so when Venus is in a 12th house, we're kind of more tuned into our fantasy about the person, how much we're compromising. It can be very confusing. So again, you just need to try to be very present and make it more conscious. That's what the 12th house is about, where we are, and we're often, of course, quite convinced that we're doing it right. At least in our fantasy world, we're fine, we're perfect. Just other things aren't conforming to our fantasy world, and then when that happens, we get frustrated. And so that's the frustration of Venus in the 12th house. You said in Libra, so that means it's a Scorpio rising. So that would be, again, that same kind of thing, right? Where a lot of projection and like thinking the relationship is this big thing or the partner is this big thing. And then when you see that it's just not even that it's terrible, but just that it's not what your fantasy thought, then it can be the other extreme. And just confusion about why is it keep showing up where things aren't what I've imagined them to be. So notice that. So we'll just leave it at that. So I hope this was helpful, and go ahead and share it with others if it was beneficial to you. And again, I'll just put the link one more time there for those who are just kind of checking it out now. That again, this this web class, it's free. It's very powerful, transformative teachings where you get the whole sort of gamut of Venus in 2020 for your sign. And I also talk about later in the year when Venus goes through Cancer, Leo, and Virgo, that section of the zodiac where it's not as powerful, particularly the Leo-Virgo section. I explain why as well, how that part of the year can be different as well, and perhaps a little difficult, like what happens after August. So again, it'd be very comprehensive for you to get your head around Venus in this year, Venus 2020, and what that might mean for you. And so, I hope that you avail yourself of that and share this with others. And thank you for attending.